Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is Emma Hersh. She is the CEO and founder of GigLeads, which is a new company that's been running for about 2 months now. And this is a first for me in many different ways, because it's the first time I've had someone sort of in the business world, first time I've had a business leader of some description, and first time I've kind of had like a company on the show. And I do want to kind of just say right off the bat before we get into this interview today, that this isn't like a sponsorship, this isn't like an ad or something. Obviously Emma reached out to me when I was looking for guests, and I thought this would be a unique challenge in many different ways, because it's not just going to be showcasing the business, but it'll also be actually finding out more about Emma. And hopefully for people that are interested in this business and in this idea, it will kind of give you a bit more than just like, like for instance, if we just did the podcast on the business, I'm not sure that would necessarily have the same level of interest as if, you're finding out the person behind the business. Because especially with startups, I feel that, when that it's kind of by a person who's more relatable, it kind of makes that business more, I guess, relatable in many ways. But anyways, welcome to the show, Emma. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Christian. It's great to be here.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. Obviously, this is your first time doing a podcast, so it's a first for you too.
Yeah.
There's different ways I could jump into this, but I think the first thing I want to do is just jump into your background. So a lot of this information I found from LinkedIn, so thank God for LinkedIn. It says here that you had a 17-year career in business management, specifically within the logistics and supply chain industry. So just briefly talk to me about, how you got into that. Like, I know that you did a degree which kind of set you up to that, but what kind of made you decide that you wanted to go and follow that route for many years?
Pure chance, actually. It was not, I'd moved from the UK, as I'm sure you kind of got that from my LinkedIn, and ended up sort of emigrating out to America, and that was back in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't kind of go the typical route that most people go, and just, I started off at the bottom. I started off in, dispatch, and, worked my way up into a supervisory path and then into management from there. But yeah, ended up with quite an extensive career there with business management and logistics, and did a lot of traveling all up and down America. So in some ways, I don't even know if it was a choice to get into that industry, but it was just, I had an opportunity, I got into it, and the career path just took off from there.
And was it a case of just kind of like seeing how far it would go, or because obviously you said that you're taking opportunities here and there, so was it, oh hey, this is great, I get to travel around the world, and that's kind of the thing that pulls you? Or I guess what my question is like, what was the main thing that was kind of keeping you going and kind of, I guess, pushing you to keep following that route for so many years?
I think with most things, you kind of you get on a path or on a trajectory there.
Right,
And I think most people like to probably challenge themselves a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're sort of in that management mode, and you go from a supervisor to an ops manager, from an ops manager to a GM, the path just keeps going. So I think most people probably just like to challenge themselves, and to see, that's your career. You want to see how far you can take it. And in some ways, I started quite late, because I lived in the UK until being about 29, and then went over to the States. So yeah, kind of giving my age away there terribly, but
no, that's it. That's interesting to me. I mean, because I feel like, that, okay, since you come from like an older generation, I'm not trying to be rude there, I'm just saying, it's different in the sense that, like, okay, like many years ago, it would be, and I'm talking many, many years ago, but it would be like, a job was for life or for a given period and stuff.
I think I was probably the first generation that got away from that,
Right.
that was my parents' generation was very much, to put it in perspective, and this is really showing my age now. Back in the UK, when you went through the education system, I was the first year of people, the batch of people that did the GCSE.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Exam, when they switched over from the old O levels to that.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a whole mess because nobody knew what they were doing. But you know, it was very much sort of, yeah, you were in the mode of your parents were saying, you know, you get a job, you know, stay in a job,
Mm. Hmm.
you know, try and keep in that job, buy a house, stay in that house, and of course things just don't move like that now. And then things shifted from that. I think very much, you know, I saw in my generation. Yeah,
Well, the one thing I've noticed as well, just on this topic, like that perception that, you know, you should stay in a job, and, you know, if you don't, then that kind of represents maybe a lack of loyalty, or maybe
right.
a lack of motivation, or whatever, you know. It now has kind of flipped in the sense that if you spend too long in a company, sometimes the perception can be, oh well, this person just lacks ambition, they lack
Yeah,
drive, they just want to have a comfortable life, so to speak. But I
right.
don't know, for me personally, every corporate company that I've worked for, and to some extent also, you know, in customer services and so on, like there seems to be this thing of, you know, you only really stay in a position for probably a maximum of 2 years, maybe a bit longer if you're following the managerial route, but it
Usually
can,
about 4 in that realm. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, there seems to be like this cut-off point, and it really does depend on your strategy. But a lot of the time, once you've kind of got what you need, you know, you just go to the next company, and no one really has that perception of, oh well, you know, what about loyalty, what about this, what about that.
Mhm.
It's like kind of just understood that that's just how uh, I guess the job market works now, you know.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. You know, it's, you know, part of my role along the years was to do some recruitment and to, you know, look at CVs or resumes, as they call them over there in the States. But, and that was something that I would look out for. I mean, that was at one time, it used to be if you'd been with a certain company for 15, 20 years, then, you know, you were regarded as a, you know, loyal, dependable
Yeah,
employee
yeah.
that could, and even in my sort of tenure, I would look at it and go, why have you been there so long? Why have you not sort of moved across to, so, you know, so it's quite a double-edged sword now. Yeah, so sort of, you know, it can benefit you more to move around every 3 to 4 years and gain a bit more of that experience, I think, you know.
I'm one of those people, like I just need to, for my own personal reasons, like I feel like it's important to keep moving and keep growing and
Right.
learning and stuff. But like I feel bad for people that just want to stick with a job, because I get that. Sometimes, you know, you're just happy doing a certain thing for a certain
Right.
company, or you know, whatever. Like I don't feel that that should be used against you. But
No.
I mean, I don't know. It's so
it,
tricky to
it's
know what to do.
yeah, it's very double-sided, as you say. It's, and I'm the same. It's not, you know, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Some people are quite
Yeah.
comfortable, or, you know, you've got a good career path with, you know, said company, so you'll stay with it. So I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing, but I think probably, again, maybe a generational thing. You know, I had parents say, you know, you stay in the job, you work at
Right.
that
Yeah.
job. I had everyone, you know, in the older generation I knew had been, you know, gone to a certain job from school, stayed in it till retirement. My generation, you know, you were sort of coming off the back of the 80s when we had, you know, recessions and manufacturing companies were kind of going under, or changing more into um, automated processes and needing less staff. And so I think it was it was kind of like a bit of a mad scramble, every man or woman for herself, because it was, you couldn't be guaranteed that that job was going to last for that period of time, or that company was going to last for that period of time.
I mean, it's a very good point, especially in these days. I was talking to someone the other day about this, and he said, you know, with the way things move right now, every 5, 10 years, or even less than that, some jobs can exist for 1 minute, and then a couple of years
Mhm.
later, they're just completely eradicated because there's no use for them. You know, I remember
Right.
there was one company that I was working for where we basically, what we were doing, well, the company was trying to get all of its analytics done in such a way that, you know, you wouldn't need people kind of monitoring them to a certain
Right.
extent. You just have the reports coming automatically.
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Yeah.
I sort of identified, okay,
Yeah.
my job in, let's say, 6 months won't exist. Like,
Right.
so I even need to
And
like,
that's
you
true.
know,
You know, it's you know, I think tech and advancement is a brilliant thing. I mean, I love progress, but it does sort of leave some people behind. I mean, again, double side, you know, two sides of the same coin. You know, processes change, evolve. There's a lesser need for people on one side, but then it kind of opens up opportunity on the opposite side of that. You know.
Absolutely, yeah. So, well, yeah, what prompted you to go freelance? I mean, obviously, you had this long career. You know, some
Hmm.
people might say, "Oh, you know, you're comfortable. You've got this. You know, you're high up in
Hmm.
in the corporate ladder. You know, you've established yourself. You've got a lot of respect and stuff. You know, you could
Yeah.
probably go anywhere. Why the decision to go freelance?
Just probably just a progression at that point. I think
Okay.
you hit a point in your career. I mean, I did, not for everybody, but I certainly did, where it was a case of, well, I've sort of done all this stuff. I did a massive amount of traveling around up and down the United States, mainly on the eastern side. And then you kind of get to a point, you end up at this sort of crossroads at a certain point where you kind of go, I've done all this stuff and it's been great.
Yeah.
I'm now, hitting 40 as I was then.
Okay.
And you go, so what now? Am I going to do this now until the very point that I retire? Or am I going to kind of do something different,
Yeah, I
And for me, it
respect
was do
that.
something different, Yeah. So
That's the
it
same
was,
mentality I have as well. Like,
yeah,
I get that.
yeah.
Um, but like, I guess I want to probe you more on this because obviously, freelance is one of those things that it's kind of a scary notion for anyone that hasn't done it before.
Right.
And even me, you know, I'm kind of doing freelance right now just because I have to. It's not even a
Mm-hmm.
choice case. I can't find a full-time role, but because I've kind of proven myself over the years, I've got people that I'm working with, like clients that are basically either referred from someone I've worked with
Right.
or, you know, through the network, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's funny to me because years ago I thought like, you know, it's probably inevitable I'm going to end up freelance. And here we are,
Right.
you know, during a pandemic situation where the job market's all a bit
Right.
crazy, can't find work, but freelance is an option.
Right.
And but for, I think, yeah, again, just bringing it back to the point, like for most people it's scary because it's like, you know, instead of having like a reliable wage and, you know, job duties and all of this stuff and work given to you, you're actively chasing, you know, project by project, and nothing is ever sort of guaranteed. That's not to say that, you know, in jobs it's completely secure, but you know, you can't just kind of get like fired like straight away. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas with a freelance project, it ends, that could be it.
Yeah.
You might
Or
not get
someone decides not to pay you. That could be it. That's
that
always
too.
it.
Yeah.
I think every freelancer has probably run into that. And it is, you're right. As you say, it's a very scary proposition when you start doing it. So when I quit my career to go freelance, I mean, I think a lot of people have this impression of, oh, you had a good career. So, you had
Right.
loads of money behind you. So you were set, and I'm not going to say that's untrue. I mean, I had some, kind of cash behind me to get started because that's
Right.
just, it's
Yeah.
just sensible. You're going to do it. You kind of stockpile a little bit, but probably not as much as everybody thought. So it
Hmm.
is, if any of your listeners and viewers, if you're involved in the freelance world and as you found out yourself, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be really, really scary to not know where your next rent payment or mortgage payment is coming from. And, you have to think on your feet, you have to be pretty agile, and basically sometimes you have to pretty much do anything that's going to, provide a bit of cash at the end of the day. um,
It kind of seems to me like that's where the market is headed, because I see more and more freelancing opportunities, more and more freelancers, and also the nature of jobs. Like, you know, during this whole pandemic, while I've been applying for jobs as well, I've noticed there's a lot of things that are like fixed term contracts, you know, 6 months,
right.
a year, something like
Yeah.
that, where it's kind of, while it is full time, it is essentially saying, yeah, we only need you for this particular amount of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And to me, yeah, that's freelance. That's what it's all about, really. So I feel like without kind of stating the obvious, things are naturally changing and headed in that
Yes.
direction. In the same way that, you know, remote working, I've said this for years,
Yes.
you don't need to be in an office for
No,
most of those jobs.
I
And it
agree.
frustrates me that, you know, it's different if you work in like sales or something like that, but when you work in like marketing or something, you don't
Hmm.
need to be there. It's like
No, you don't. You really
frustrating.
don't. And it's like, and you're right. And I think maybe finally I'm sort of the opinion that that's something that should have probably started moving and shifting a little bit earlier than it did.
Yeah.
again, even in my career, I'd have people that work for me. I'm like, you don't need to be here. And, you know, I think probably I was a little bit unique in that I would operate quite well on a results-based thing, you know, for my employees, rather than, hey, you have to be at your desk at this time, punching a clock and staying there until, you know, just because somebody's sitting at a desk from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night doesn't necessarily mean that they're being productive in those hours, you know.
It's really not. No, I mean, everyone's, you know, you've got night owls, you've got people that come in the morning. You know, for me, it's always been that first block of, let's say, 3 to 4 hours. I get loads of work done then, and the rest of the day, it's just a bit like, this is a drag, and like you try and motivate yourself, but it's like, I think for instance, this time, me working at home and doing the freelance stuff in the way I've been doing it, you know, sometimes I'll work intensively for like 3 hours, then I won't do any work for the rest of the day, return to it the next time at the same time, probably get the whole thing done. And for me, it's like more motivational, because it's like, while there is like a deadline somewhere, it's still not, I guess what I'm saying is, you don't feel like this sense of guilt that you do when you're in an office and, you know, you're not being as productive as maybe you should be. And like, obviously there are people that are lazy and don't care and stuff, but I think there are many of us that want to be productive, but you can't sort of like force yourself to care. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I think it's the same as like when you're at school or university. And I remember hearing this statistic that apparently, you know, you only have like 20 minutes of like core attention where you're invested in it, and then the rest of the time, you know, your mind just kind of wanders naturally.
That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of statistics that show if you go to a meeting or a seminar, you only actually retain, I think it's 7 minutes of the information.
Oh my God.
Something like that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So yeah, it's true what you're saying.
I hate those so much. There's so many of those meetings where like, this could have been an email. I mean,
I spent my life on conference calls. When I was in the kind of the corporate world, I always have this recollection that Thursday was my worst day, because I spent 5.5 hours on conference calls back to
my
back.
God, yeah.
And then, you know, you get people calling up screaming, going, what's happening with, you know, in Miami? Or I don't know, I've been on the goddamn phone for like
I remember one
hours.
manager I had actually in one of my previous jobs. She had this problem. Like, I remember some days I would literally not see her the whole day because she was only in meetings. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. I've done it. I've lived that. You know, it is, and it's, you know, I got to the point where I think at one point I kind of called some people up or sent an email going, guys, really, come on. They were trying to hold a conference call about how to organize a time for our conference call.
Oh,
and I'm
God.
like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You know? So it just gets, you know, it's ridiculous. It can just get kind of a little bit beyond a joke, but yeah, to your point about productivity, I think everybody kind of works at different levels, and some people do good sort of, you know, doing that very sort of steady, you know, work process throughout the day. Some do good kind of just really slamming it for like 4 or 5 hours and getting the way. I'm one of those. I'm better doing that, you know.
I think like, as long as you know, always you hit your deadlines, as you said, like you hit those targets that you have numbers wise. I don't think it really matters the time in which you do that. Because I mean, you know, I used to know designers that would roll up to work, you know, pretty late in the day, like 11 a.m., but then they'd be there till later. And then I just understood that was kind of their frame. That was their time. And, you know,
and I think everyone's kind of got that somehow naturally within themselves. Yeah, and I think the danger with freelancing is it can go the opposite way if you're not careful, and you got this deadline looming, and you're like, but it's a nice day today. You know?
But that's kind of the beauty of it, though. Once you learn how to overcome, because I get that, you know, I'm not like, I often joke that I'm either super productive or super lazy, but I think that's a nice balance, because you should have that, because if you're working too hard, your body will either just go nope, or you'll get ill. So you got to like,
that's true,
embrace it.
Yeah, and you know, that's stress management, you know, especially like if you've been in the corporate world, it's you need to manage that stress a little bit, you know.
So what would you say are the key differences between standard jobs and freelance jobs?
Well, the obvious, you know, the pay kind of fluctuates a lot more when you're freelancing, but I think just, you know, along the lines of what we were just talking about, I mean, that kind of that freedom and that ability to sort of be able to direct, you know, kind of kind of carve your own destiny out almost, you know, because I think if you're freelancing, you can make the choice to say, hey, you know, I really, you know, I don't want to be like the next CEO level. I just want to kind of pay my rent and have a lot of free time. And I think that's the beauty of it, being able to, I think for me, being able to dictate your own work-life balance much more, I think is the real draw for me. You know, it's important to have your downtime. It's important to have family time. And I just, for me, I feel that I get much more flexibility with kind of freelance world to be able to do that, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember a client of mine recently, because they always ask me like, oh, can you give us like a rough idea of how long this will take? And I prefer to go by hour if it's a task like let's say like editing and proofing, because I feel like I always work in the same manner, and I'm very structured and organized with how I do it. And let's say like, because I was doing a website, right? And it went exactly how I thought it would go, where some pages would be like 3 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. And then other pages would be like 2 hours.
Yes.
So it's like, it would be impossible to say, this is how long it will take.
Right. I can fully sympathize with that, because I did a little bit of website when I first started, you know, because you kind of do everything, you know, you dip your toe in everything when you first start out freelancing. And I did a little bit of, you know, marketing. I did a bit of SEO stuff. I did, you know, website building, the whole thing. And I always love the thing of, and if you've done some website design, you know this yourself, it's like you can suddenly get caught up and spend hours on sort of one element of a page. And then invariably the client would come back and go, could you just change that? You know, that was always the kiss of death. It was, could you just, you know, can you just change this? I think when you're not in that world, you don't understand there's a lot on the back end that goes into that.
Yeah, I agree, because I remember when I started, I'll just talk about this proofreading thing again, because I learned a lot from, like, I've obviously done proofing before, but this particular time, everything was really badly written, like so badly written. And, you know, it's one of those things sometimes when you're dealing with international clients, you know, if it's coming from one language to another, they've used Google Translate, but as we know, Google Translate is rubbish. So you just have to basically start from scratch. And a lot of the time I would look at it and be like, okay, I've corrected it, but this is not the best way that this could be written. This is like, you know, it needs to be written. So I would invariably just, write
do
it.
a full rewrite.
And then I'd be like, I mean, this is taking longer, but it will be better quality. And that to me is kind of key in freelancing, because you're always trying to build like a brand for yourself. You're trying to say like, this is me, this is the services I offer, and it'll always be like this level. Whereas you get people, I've seen like a lot of people from certain countries around the world that do freelancing, but they're not paying as much attention to quality. And so it's like the focus is on like the price, like, oh, I'll do it for like $2 or something, and I mean you get what you pay for, kind of thing.
You actually do. I had a very good client for a while that I did quite a bit of sort of proofing and editing for him, and he's like, can I send you these files and these documents, because I've had this stuff written. But he said he had, you know, by his own admission, said I probably went a bit too cheap on it, and I think he'd got someone from, I don't know, like India or the Philippines or something to write, whose command of, you know, the native English wasn't where it should be. And you can tell when you read it, you can tell by the way the sentences are formulated and stuff. And he knew, he was like, you know, I probably went a bit too cheap, and you get what you pay for. But that's the component that's can be quite difficult to communicate to your clients. I think that it's, you know, there is a value attached there to the money that you're charging. Is that, you know.
Another important element to this as well, which is really interesting, is obviously Google is always becoming more aware, becoming better at understanding these things. So if you take like SEO that you've mentioned before, when you create bad content or poorly written content, like Google knows and actually like drives your content further down the SERPs. So that's search engine results pages, for those who don't know. And I found that fascinating. I was like, wow, so Google knows if your content is trash. Like, what?
Google knows if you're copying content, you know?
Yeah. Well, see, that's a tricky one. And I've explained that to clients as well sometimes, that even if you're not copying people, like a lot of the time, if you're like writing an article or a guest post article, sorry. I do apologize for that. That's never happened before.
No, hey, I'm just lucky. No, that's fine. Actually, I'm sat here at home and I have a dog, so I'm just like praying that she's going to keep quiet through this whole call.
I gotta really apologize to everyone on that. That's really unprofessional. I do apologize. That's never happened before, and like that was actually a family member as well, so I feel bad about that. But sorry. Anyway, God, that's thrown me completely. God, what was I saying? I can't even remember now.
We were talking about the quality of freelance work, and people don't always understand that there's the monetary value the monetary price does actually reflect quality, and a lot of times I think that's quite difficult to get across to clients potentially.
Yeah, I mean,
money of course is always a factor, and especially if you're a small business, your budgetary restrictions can be difficult, but at the same time, I don't know what you charge for your proofreading, editing, or writing, but I see these ads where people are like, I need 10,000 words written and I'm willing to pay like a penny a word. It was, what do you think you're going to get, really?
I mean, you're just underselling yourself. Like, one thing that I realized as well is that your price kind of reflects the quality of what you're producing. So if you undersell yourself, you're basically saying what I do is cheap and rubbish.
You're saying you don't value your own work. Yeah, exactly.
But like the perception, I mean, it's like, to me, it's the same as when you go into a store and, you see different products that are priced according to brand and stuff. Mm-hmm. And the one price is higher than another. Like, your immediate reaction is, well, the more expensive stuff is obviously higher quality. That's not always the case, but a lot of the times that will be true, because, you're paying for that quality, you're paying for that brand or whatever, and I feel that that's exactly the same with freelancing and marketing. It's
true. It's like I think there's and I don't know who, because I'm probably not as well read as I should be, but I think there's a whole paper or psychology thing written about the psychology of the perception of price versus value, and so you're right. The instant thinking, it costs more, therefore it's better.
It's really not the case.
No, it's not.
Anyway, let's bring it back to you. So obviously you mentioned the USA. So you relocated to the USA a couple of weeks after September the 11th, which is crazy. Can you tell us more about kind of the atmosphere in the airports at the time, and in general in the US when you were living there?
Yeah, well, it was just such a very unprecedented time. I mean, obviously for completely different reasons at the minute. I mean, I think we're almost living in a bit of an unprecedented time now with the whole, pandemic. I didn't expect I would see that in my lifetime. So, so obviously for different reasons, but back then it was very tense. I mean, especially in the airports. I mean, tempers were running high, emotions were running high. Everybody was extra vigilant. Everyone was on high alert. I mean, I remember when I went to the States, I went to pick up my ticket for the flight, because it was back in the day where you booked through a travel agent and you went and picked your ticket up. Yeah, the good old days. Yeah, and I remember the assistant at the travel agents kind of holding on to the ticket and sort of doing this little back and forth tug with me, and she's cautioning me, saying, you do understand that this ticket could be revoked at any time in case planes or whatever are needed for military purposes or whatever. Yeah, it was really strange.
Okay.
Yeah. It was very weird. But that's how it was. They were like, they could, put all commercial flights down, and, depending on what's needed, basically saying if we have a war or whatever,
I think it might just be a USA thing as well, because, I've flown around the world as well, been to different customs and stuff. I suppose in England it's pretty strict too. But I'll never forget this. When I went to the States back in 2014, I'd never been. And I think we'd arrived at LAX, and huge line for customs. And, I thought, oh, maybe, got a British passport, that will make a difference. No, it doesn't matter where you're from. Same for everyone. And there was a couple of really weird things that happened. I'll start with when I got to the actual gate. So basically, I hand my my ticket over and my passport, and the guy at the customs desk is just like, "Why are you here?" And I'm just like, on holiday, like I'm just this nervous 21-year-old wreck, and I'm like, on holiday, and he's like, and where will you be going? And I'm like, well, first we're going to downtown Long Beach, and then he's like, where else after that? And I'm like, I don't know, probably Las Vegas, maybe this place. And he's just staring at me like piercing eyes through me. And then just randomly he just goes, okay, go for it.
Yeah. Big question. And I think, then even when was that, 2014, you were still just a few years after September 11th. So everyone was still kind of on very high alert. I kind of found it like now it's a little more relaxed than it was back then, because it was just, everybody was just, as you can imagine, and for good reason, everybody was just in that extremely hyper vigilant mode. And it was a little scary. It was a little scary to sit on a half empty plane 3 weeks after September 11th. And I think probably the thing, I was like, when I gave you the ticket story, I think probably the reason for that was because I was flying in and out of Boston at the time, which of course is where all the planes were hijacked from. So going in and out of Logan Airport. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, and it was only about maybe 6 months prior that I'd been on one of the planes going, and I can't remember if I was flying in. I think I'd flown into Logan Airport and then taken a connecting flight somewhere else. And the pilot's like, and if you look out of the plane to your right, you'll be able to see the top of the World Trade Center. And I was like, yeah, it's just a building. I'm not, and then 6 months later, who knew? So yeah, it was quite a scary time, and I had a lot of friends in New York City that were, quite deeply impacted by all that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's again just on the level of like strict airport security. I remember that same day, I before that altercation at the gate, I never forget this because it was sort of surreal. It was like being in a movie, seeing this. It was like we're all standing in the line, it's taking forever, and someone, I don't know why they decided this was a good idea, but they decided to take a photo with flash photography.
Okay.
And this really tall Asian American like security guard who was at one of the desks literally like leaped. No, he shouted first. He goes,
right,
who took the photo? Who took the photo? And then he just jumps over the desk and just goes, no one is going anywhere until they tell me who took the photo. And we're all just, it's like being in school, like when someone's done wrong and no one says anything. Yeah, except like this is like really serious.
Yeah.
And we're all just like, and luckily,
like, it wasn't me. Yeah.
Well, luckily, we had a guard near us who kind of motioned to split some of us off.
Right.
So we were in the part of people that just got let through, and then everyone.
You were away from the offending party.
Yeah, everyone else was like they were under deep interrogation, and this guy would just not drop it. Like even though he made it clear why it's not okay to take photos, he was still hounding until he would find that person.
Did he find them?
I don't know, because I was kind of like too nervous to look. I didn't want to make us suspicious. I was like,
yeah.
But yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, the whole security thing, the customs thing, they don't play about there. I mean, that's of course I had to go through the whole immigration process and all that good stuff. So it's it's a lot of hoops to jump through. And
did they ask you any like weird questions? Anything?
They always do, a bit like you do there. Well, I think really it's just they sort of want to know why you're there and how long you're staying, and they just want to know where you are. And I think really they just sort of want that point that you're going to be at in case you suddenly decide that you're not going to go back to your own country. So they kind of have a starting point to find you from. I think that's usually the motivation for it, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a flawed concept because you could just drive to another state without them knowing.
You could just give any address, what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's so vast. I mean, when I first went there, I think I flew I lived in Florida at first. I was in Florida for 10 years. And then I lived in Atlanta for the last 7 that I was there. Damn. And when I was first there, and I was in Florida, I went to Colorado. And I couldn't, like, being from England, we fly 2 hours and we're in Spain, 4 hours, 5 hours. We're in Greece, Italy, Cyprus. It was really hard for me to get it, my head around that you could fly for 4 or 5 hours and you're still in the same country.
I mean, it's so much more preferable than the alternative of doing the road trip. Like because I'm a big fan of professional wrestling, right? And I hear about all this kind of travel that they have to do continuously. Obviously not now, but like before. And sometimes they'd be driving as long as like 13 hours or some craziness like that. Like, I remember,
actually, it's an odd thing. They talk in terms of hours in the States. I don't know if you know that. If you kind of like here, if you say, how far is it from Manchester to London, they'll say, it's like, I don't even know what it is, like 200 odd miles or something. Over there, they'll say it's like, it's like 6 hours. The drive. They'll give you the drive time rather than the mileage.
That's the thing. Like, I remember when we were there, my friend that I was traveling with was like, we have to get a convertible. We have to have a car. And I didn't understand then, but as soon as we got there, I understood why. Like, if you don't have a car in America, you're screwed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And people from England do that. I used to find that a lot. Like, my family would come over and they're like, well, we'll just get the bus. I'm like, no, no, you're not. If you, I mean, big cities and stuff have public transportation, same as we do. But unless you're in somewhere like, like New York or Chicago, where they've got like a good subway system, it's just not the same.
But even then, though, if you're in the major cities, it's like being in London. It's just a nightmare because you've got so many people and it's so packed all the time. I mean, it's just, you're better off just driving. Like,
maybe.
I don't know.
It's not. I don't love the whole subway thing either. So I hear you. Yeah.
It just sounds like I remember when I was working in Estonia, I had a friend who was from New York, or he'd lived in New York City, and I remember he was just. I walked into the room and he was talking to another girl there who happened to live there at some point, and he's explaining New York City, and I've never been, and I'm like, that sounds just like London, but 10 times worse.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's so small. I mean, like Manhattan Island is so small. People don't realize how small it is, and it's so densely populated. It is a nightmare to get around sometimes. So, have you been since? Have you been to New York?
No, I haven't been anywhere. I've barely seen America. I've been to California, Las Vegas, and
oddly I haven't. Vegas, yes, love Vegas, but California, all the time I spent in America, it's just like an oddity that I never set foot in California, not even to take like a connecting flight or anything.
I suppose
I've been all the way across to Hawaii, so you think I would have but I ended up connecting in Seattle, and
I suppose it's not necessarily like a big business hub as far as corporate's concerned, because it's more like entertainment industry, isn't it? And like tourism and stuff. I mean, I imagine there's some business. Obviously, you've got like Silicon Valley and stuff like that, but like in terms of like, maybe like financial hub, for example, then that's going to be more, I guess, NYC and Chicago and places like that. Maybe.
So I haven't really spent much time at all, or any time at all, in California. So
it's nice. I mean, it's pretty crazy as well, but it's got some nice places too.
I think a lot of places in the States just are in their own way, generally a little bit crazy,
there was a lot of weird stuff. I remember it was really weird, like going to a supermarket and seeing that they sold like, ice cream and then guns then just like, what?
Right. Yeah, and that's a whole, different from England. I mean, that whole gun culture is definitely just completely, alien to us, I think.
It's like in some Walmarts, you could live in there.
Yeah.
Like they literally have everything. You've got pharmacy, beds, food,
tents,
everything. It's crazy as it sounds. You
guns,
could actually, and then like a lot of them are 24-hour, like some of our Tesco Metro stores.
Yeah, that was tough when I came back, because it's we don't cater quite so much to people, so I found shops aren't open as long, places aren't open as long, and it's just like the general sort of day-to-day conveniences. I think because I've only been back about 2 years now.
Oh wow. Okay.
And until coronavirus hit, I was kind of back, but I wasn't back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think year one I was back. I was literally back and forth to the States like 5-6 times for, sometimes up to 6 weeks at a time. So, it wasn't like I'd made this big transition, because I was, still going back and forth. And then even earlier this year, I'd just got back to England just before the whole lockdown thing happened. So I was over in, I'd been in Florida actually for about 4 or 5 weeks, and got back just around the end of February, and then of course, a few weeks later we hit the lockdown thing. So
it's a good point you make, actually. I mean, I gotta say, like, I came back to England in February. So it was cutting it really close. I was in London, like London for like a week, and then came up to Manchester, had this stress of finding a place to live, did that, and then all of this stuff happened, and I'm like, wow. But as far as like adjusting, because obviously I'd only been back to England like twice in those 3 years, and it was only for like a month at best. And to get to the point, like, you know, I was thinking it does take some time to adjust, and even now, like I don't feel the same as I did living in it. Like it's nice, and Manchester's nice, but it's like, I think, yeah, when you've lived in other countries, you do have this like newfound appreciation and feeling as far as like when you come back to your homeland, you kind of feel a bit like appreciative of some things, missing other things, but like not, like it takes some time to kind of get back into
it
like
does. Well, they say actually repatriating is harder than, you know, leaving in the first place, and I can well believe it. I mean, I struggle very badly with certain things. Of course, America, I was in Florida, Atlanta, and Atlanta's amazing. I loved living there.
I'd love to go there.
It's very cool, and I lived very much in the Midtown area, right in the heart of the city, so everything was right there.
Which years did you live there? Because obviously The Walking Dead's been filmed there for a long time.
Yes, it has. Yeah, that was being filmed there while I was there. Yeah,
that's so cool. That's so cool.
And I think they film a lot of that quite a way south of the city. I forget the name of the little town that they film it in now. It'll come to me, but it's south of Atlanta by about an hour and a half, I think. But yeah, they do. And actually, the filming industry as a whole in Atlanta is massive. There's actually more movies made in Atlanta now than in Hollywood, I think.
Oh, wow.
Because they did some humongous, I guess some tax breaks or whatever, you know, to try and attract the movie industry into the city. And I think the last year, I haven't followed it for a couple of years, but I think the last year I looked, they said something like the movie industry had bought some ridiculous sum like 900 billion into, you know, the state of Georgia.
This to me is another fascinating concept as well, because I've had a couple of American guests on the show previously, and I remember one of the guests I asked about this, like how every state essentially is like, it's almost like it's a different country,
right? Yeah,
in terms of like how it's run. And like I remember him saying that, you know, you've got like your federal, so government legislation and guidelines and stuff, then you've got like state guidelines and stuff, and then municipal, which I guess would be like county,
and
I just like sit there like,
and everyone varies, you know. It's like, you know, depending on which state you're living in, it depends what state tax you pay. Like in Florida there's none, in Atlanta it was it's like 7% or something, you know.
Well, so it's like with those guys, like, because they're musicians, DMT for those who are wondering, like they you know, obviously they do drugs and all of this stuff, and he said that you have to like be really careful, because like in one state you're fine, and then you got drive just half an hour into that other state and like you're looking at serious offenses.
It's true. I watched, there's some like good comedians and stuff. I like a lot of stand-up comedy, so I watched quite a few American comedians, and there's a guy who's pretty well known out there, and I think he got arrested in Florida for partying too hard, and he's like, I've been partying in Florida. He said, I've been partying in Florida for years. I didn't even know they had laws. You know.
Fancy that, party law. Wow.
Yeah. He said, I didn't even know they had any laws. He's like, how was I arrested?
Let's just move it back to the job markets. How does the US job market sort of compare with the UK job market? Now, obviously, they're going to be totally different, but what do you think are like the key differences?
I think probably just the vastness of the country makes such a difference, and you know, corporations are huge, so I think there's a lot. I think, you know, I mean, you all read these things about, you know, like the American dream, and you sort of, but when you go there, and I mean, this is just really sort of from my perspective, but I got very much the impression that as long as you're prepared to work and put the effort in, and you know, you have to be a little bit smart with it and take your opportunities, but you can kind of basically just do or be anything you want to be, because the opportunity is there. So I ended up in, you know, the logistics and supply chain world. And as you said, I moved up through the ranks. I got quite high in the industry, to the point where I was the only female at my management level, and sometimes for a level or two below me. And I just, you know, it was quite a different state of affairs to what I expected when I, you know, was coming up through school and stuff. I didn't know what my career was going to be, but I will always maintain that I don't think I would have ever had the opportunities in England that I was afforded in America. I don't think I would have had the career that I had if I'd have remained in England. I just don't. I don't think I would have been given the opportunity. So, and now whether that's just because we're a smaller country, therefore everything is much more competitive, maybe that. It's hard to sort of put one sort of defining reason on it. If there is one reason, it could be multiple. I don't know. But it just, that was always the impression I got, that I wouldn't have the same chances here as I had there, you know?
It's crazy as it sounds. Yeah, I agree with you as well. I remember one of the main reason I left the UK when I did was, I'd finished my degree. I did the degree to get into marketing, to have like a specialism, something to get a job, basically.
Right.
Because I'd spent so many years in customer service before that. And,
customer service is always a delight, isn't it? It's just like the worst. I used to have customer service people that worked for me, and I used to have the greatest admiration for them, because it's just awful. People call up screaming at you, and it's just, yeah. You just
have to learn to deal with it. And the funny thing was, like, before I did my degree, the only really customer service I'd done was like supermarkets, which I thought was bad enough. And I had the luck of the draw because I worked at Waitrose. So
okay, so you were kind of on the high end of the supermarket.
Slightly nicer. It's a bit like saying like, I had a less dirty patch rather than the super dirty patch. You know what I mean? Like nothing against Waitrose. It was more to do with like the customers and what you kind of dealt with day to day. But that was only like 2 or 3 years before uni, and then I did, so I took some time out, went to uni at 21, did it that way. And obviously, inevitably, I had to take work while I was at uni. So I did all these jobs, in hospitality and stuff. And that was the real learning curve. That was wow, I had it easy.
That will show you sides of human nature that you didn't know existed.
Oh man, yeah. I could never dream of talking to people that way. I mean, that's the biggest lesson, I suppose.
Yeah. I was always sort of raised with the manners cost nothing thing, and it's
But like, bringing it back to the job aspect, like obviously did that degree, couldn't find anything in London, and I was looking for like 2 or 3 months whilst still working at that hotel after graduation. And at the time I was dating a girl who's from Estonia, and we sort of sat down and decided like maybe you have a shot at Estonia, because we're just going to be stuck here. And it was only ever supposed to be like a temporary thing, and then we would come back to the UK, right? And 2 or 3 months turned into 3 years. It's just how it is. But I remember, that's the thing. I remember thinking that I'm better off in that country because I'm actually getting work experience and jobs. And it's funny to me being back in the UK with like a degree, 3 years and running worth of experience. Yeah, I can't find a job. And the main thing I'm being told is, oh, you don't have enough experience, which I find hilarious.
It's like the cover-all excuse, I think.
It's like, how much do you need? Like, I think what you said was really important. This idea of like an oversaturated market, even if you are in a smaller country, obviously the UK is so much smaller than the US, so there's less competition. But I mean, we're rich in terms of immigration, so you're competing with people from all around the world, and also, just very good education here as well. So it just, you know what I mean? Like it kind of, I suppose it's good for us because we've been abroad. Our CV stands out a little bit more. But if you're just standard, went to do, university, got the experience, you're just another fish in the ocean, really. I mean,
it's and it is. I used to think, and I mean, of course, I was much younger then, but I used to think it was very, very difficult to sort of just get your foot in the door in England, like almost like, it just, maybe it was my perception. It just seemed that people were just not willing to sort of give you that opportunity. And then again, being older and having worked in management and hiring, if you've got a pool of well-qualified people, then I know it sounds awful, but why should you give that person a chance if you've got this whole team of well-qualified people here and that they can do the job that you need them to do? And, it's quite difficult.
I agree with you. Like, because I see it 2 different ways. I see it like from the business side, and then from the kind of, I don't know how to put it. Like, no, actually, no, I only see it from the business side, because the only complaint I have with companies right now in terms of their hiring is one thing. If someone just genuinely lacks all the experience or lacks it in some major areas, then that's fine. I mean, a lot of the time I don't go for opportunities if like, there's something major missing, like, oh, we need you to be, comfortable at graphics design or programming or something. Obviously I'm not going to go for that, right? But if it's one where I've got, say, like 80% of what they need, and then it's like a tiny bit of stuff I need to work on, I'm like, well, every company has resources for training.
Right,
A lot of the time you're just learning on the job anyway. You have to learn their systems anyway. Even if you do have what they need, every company uses different systems, different programs, so you got to learn that.
That's true.
But I think the bigger thing, and this is what I take exception with, is that, yeah, you can get someone that ticks all the boxes, but really it's about the attitude of the person. In terms of like what matters, you need someone that thinks the way that you think, or can be molded, or that you have chemistry with, or whatever. I think that's why, like, that expression, that the supposedly the employer in the job interview kind of knows within 20 seconds if they're going to give you the job or not. And I think that's not, because I think a lot of people misconstrue that as like, oh, it's how you look. But I think it's more like the way you carry yourself and your attitude, and then that's what they're going to base it on.
I agree with that 100%. Like I said, I was involved with hiring people, and I've had definitely more than one hire that I made where like my superiors, and I had to justify that. Then they're like, "Why the hell did you hire that person?" But I would hire a lot of the time on sort of attitude and sort of work ethic, and because you can skills, as long as they have the basic skills, you have to be able to read and write and stuff. But as long as you have the basic skills, you can teach sort of what's needed, or people can learn, if they've got a reasonable aptitude. But you can't teach somebody to care. You can't teach a work ethic. You can't teach that at all. So I would hire that over and above the skills some people had a lot of the time, just because it's going to cause you less of a headache.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Also, just on that trail of thought, do you have any like horror stories as far as hiring is concerned? Any like crazy interview situations?
No, I don't think. I've had like weird stuff, because it's America, so sometimes it's like there is such a broad sort of spectrum of people, and I think it's generally. I mean, I think if you go to an interview in England, people will dress appropriately, go to an interview and try and present themselves as best as they can. America, it's a little bit different. I've had people turn up like dragging 3 kids with them into
no way.
Yeah, seriously, and they're like, I can't get anyone to babysit my kids. I'm coming out. I've got to leave them here with you. I'm like, no.
I'm caught in two minds about that, because on one hand it's like, you can't really do that, but on the other hand it's like, well, at least they turned up and they're making an effort.
At least they turned up and they try. Yeah, it's kind of it's just a really strange thing to see, like somebody drag their kids in, like, and tell their 3 kids to sit in the waiting room wait for them while they have this job interview. So
did you ever get anyone that did anything like weird, or like maybe not weird, like really badly wrong, or gave off like a bad impression or something?
No, not that I can really. I think it usually goes the other way. I think people talk themselves up like really, really big, and like you're trying to challenge them, saying, but you don't have experience of this, or can you tell me? And they're just doing this sort of talk thing, and you're like, no, you don't really have a clue. But as far as like actual horror stories go, I don't really have anything. Yeah.
I struggle with the question of like, oh, tell us about the weaknesses that you have. Because like, I try to go and like say things like, oh, maybe I'm too passionate with certain ideas and that can cloud my judgment or stuff like that. And then I'll try and put a spin on it and be like, but I'm open-minded and I'm working on this and blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't feel like there's any good answer you can give.
There really isn't. And depending on the interviewer, I don't know if there's any real good answer. I mean, I've asked that question myself. It can go either way. Sometimes people give this whole litany of like these weaknesses, and you're like, that's probably a little too much. Not inspiring me to hire you. Or they'll do like that and try and take a negative and turn it into a positive, which I do that myself. It's a long time since I've been to an interview now, but I think I would try and do that myself. But it's one of those questions that there's never really a good answer, and it probably depends on the interviewer too, as to how they're going to take the answer.
It's just a trap though, isn't it? Because like I'm a very honest person, so like I would say it as it is, but then I quickly so like I'll say like something like, I'm not very good with maths, and then I'll realize that I can't just say that, so I got to like put something in there that makes it not as bad. Something like,
Right.
but I've worked a lot with analytics and finance, so
Mhm.
I'm pretty good with that, and I've
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard not to stumble with that. So yeah.
Okay, let's move it forward. So obviously we understand that there are major differences between the UK and the US job markets,
Mhm.
but how does freelancing differ between both countries? Like, what are the major differences there?
I actually don't know if there's a lot of major differences. It's just a similar um, it's just a similar arena, I think, in both countries. I think having done some freelancing myself, I think we're sort of back to the same conversation that we were just having against, the size of the country versus sort of opportunity. I think, and I haven't done a massive amount of freelancing here since I've got back to the UK, and a lot of my clients and I still do a little bit. I have clients, but they're more sort of international
Yeah.
international based. I think it's the same sort of thing as we were saying about the job market. I think it's probably a little bit harder to break in, a little bit harder to kind of sort of get up above the crowd. Just a little bit more competitive all around, I think, in terms of, I think there's possibly more quality here. I think there's probably a lot more people doing it in the States. There's much higher numbers, but I think we're sort of so concentrated that you've really got to be sort of good at what you're doing,
Okay. And I noticed that you're currently based in Manchester. Is there any
Mhm.
particular reason that you decided to base sort of things there, or is that just random?
Not Manchester was actually, it was a place that I always came to
Oh,
when I was
okay.
young. I was actually brought up in Yorkshire,
Hmm.
but I would spend a lot of time over here in Manchester when I came. And and actually before I moved to the States, it was very much on the cards that I was going to move to Manchester. It was either going to be Manchester or London, and I had a lot of friends here in Manchester, so it was probably winning out overall. And then, fate had it that I ended up going to America, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it was just a place I spent a lot of time. It's sort of, a bit of a northern girl, I guess, so, northern city. And it just seems to be where I've landed since I've come back.
I've got to say, business-wise, I've noticed since I've moved, because I've never been here ever before. This is
Right.
new to me, and it does kind of feel like, I don't know, can you say a competition to London? It feels like an emerging second city. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
obviously,
it
like,
seems to
but
be.
Birmingham technically is the second city in terms of amount of people and stuff. But I think
Right.
that in terms of like your major hubs for activities or
Hmm.
things going on, it's people always talk about Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool, and such. And
Right.
obviously, there's specific reasons for that. But Manchester, um, certainly visually as well, kind of
Hmm.
appears now to be an emergent place in terms of all the different companies that are coming here, and
Yeah.
um, real estate developments here and stuff.
Yeah.
It really does seem to be developing considerably. And one of the other interesting things I found is that there's like all these kind of traditional trade links between like Manchester and like St. Petersburg
Right.
and other countries, and Wuhan, for instance, which is
Right.
a bit
Right.
weird.
Bit
Um,
strange. Yeah.
yeah, very strange, but it's logical. Apparently, it's twinned
Yeah.
with Wuhan, and that's
Hmm.
the reason why Manchester's ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff, because they had the information early.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, I've only been back here about 18 months, 2 years. So it's difficult for me to kind of get a bead on it right now. But it does seem that some of the investment is starting to push up north now,
Yes.
out of London. Whereas at one time, especially when I was younger, everything was just very, very much concentrated in London as the capital. But
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing to me as well. Like, particularly when you look at the news and stuff. Like, I don't pay attention much to the news. I just kind of like skim it just to keep
mhm,
on track of stuff. And yeah, you're right. Like, all you'd ever hear about is like London, and what's going on in London, and the only
right,
stuff you'd hear about up north is like just like funny cutesy stories, or like
right.
maybe if it's a particularly crazy winter, you might hear about what's going on up north, but you'd never really hear about what's going on in the other cities. And
Yeah,
I
and
find
it
that
was,
bizarre.
and there's such that like divide, between north and south. It was always sort of looked at as very, but I even found like since I've since I've come back and I've driven around the country, and I'll go down south, then I'll drive back up, you know, up to say Manchester, and you get those road signs that say the north, and it almost sounds grudging even on the road sign.
It's funny as well because I don't know. For me, I find people up here really friendly.
Yeah.
Because one of the complaints I always had about living in London was people. I mean, it comes with the territory as well. I imagine it's like that in any place you go. Probably like Moscow, New York, whatever. People don't have the time for pleasantries. It's like get out of my way, I'm busy, kind of thing.
There's very much north-south divide in the States, though. The South is seen as much
Yeah.
more sort of friendly and hospitable, whereas, like New York, people are sort of regarded as a little bit rude and vulgar. Having been to both, I can say that I found people in New York to be quite polite and friendly and helpful. But it's just a very different attitude, I think. Like, I mean, people in the South will just wait for you, like if you go and want to order food or a sandwich and you're sort of staring at a sandwich board, they'll wait there politely for you while you make a decision what you want to eat. Whereas in New York, they'll say, okay, I'll come back to you next.
That's
but
so
people
true.
In the South think that's rude,
That's so true.
But they don't think it's so the people from the southern states perceive that as being rude and abrupt, but they don't think it's rude to hold up 30 people behind them in a queue.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I've got good and bad experiences with London in the same manner as well, and I do think it does come down to time. That's the key.
Yeah, time. People are busy. You don't have the time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move the conversation forward. You've also worked extensively as a business consultant. How exactly do you help businesses in this role? Like, what exactly is involved with business consultancy?
It's just really sort of getting business on track. And a lot of that, I think, came from my logistics and supply chain experience. Because even though I was in that industry, really what it boiled down to is a lot of my job was to go into individual buildings or terminals that were perhaps struggling or not operating as they should, and then fix them, in quotes,
like save a dying sinking ship, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly, save the sinking ship. So in terms of business consultancy, that's what I did with that, to help businesses. And I also worked on sort of if you've snooped my LinkedIn, you probably know this too, when I first came back here, I sort of partnered with a local college as well and helped them to do a lot of they needed help with developing a whole logistics and supply chain training course, basically. They have a whole facility set up that is devoted to, and it's across on the East Coast. It's based around, there's a lot of sort of dock area around there, a lot of logistics, a lot of sort of import export, I think. So they've based this training facility there, and it was brand new, but a very state of the art, very, very cool facility that I went around, and I helped them put together their initial sort of offerings, if you like, for their logistics and supply chain training modules, which was all very, it's not just like a trade, it was all very, very much backed by, the logistics bodies and things here. So it was the real deal. So that was kind of interesting. So yeah, I consulted with them for a good year or so on that. So that really took up most of my time in that realm.
Cool. I'm going to take it on a bit of a more serious route here, but there's reasons by why I'm asking.
Okay.
So many people that have worked in corporate jobs, myself included, have experienced, unfortunately, some sort of toxicity, office politics in the workplace. What is your experience of this, and how did you handle it?
I think I think you're right. You get it. I think you get it in any and every job. I think you do, and I always hate to kind of say this but it is a true fact. Is being a woman in a male-dominated environment can be very difficult. And the old adage is true. You do have to work twice as hard, do twice as much. And I think sometimes and I think that's difficult to understand sometimes if you're a guy in that industry, because you don't kind of have the same prejudices coming your way. It's a little bit different. But that's not to say that that's anybody's fault particularly. You just kind of don't get it, because a lot of the time, a lot of these businesses can kind of be a very male-oriented environment. So it's very kind of a welcoming environment also, almost for guys. So you do have to work a little differently. You do have to work a little harder, a little smarter. But everybody handles it in their own way. I actually had very, very good partnerships and very good business relationships with a lot of guys that I worked with closely. But maybe I was, just very lucky. I had a very good team of people. I had very good relationships with those people. So I have to say, honestly, fortunately, I didn't run into the whole, the glass ceiling thing too much. I've encountered it here and there, but it's, for me, I think I was quite lucky. I didn't get that too much, And I don't know. I tend to think maybe people don't argue with me so much. I'm usually pretty good at what I'm doing, and the other thing is not. I think I have quite a large physical presence as well. I mean, it's difficult to tell here because we're sat down talking on video chat, but I'm 6'2",
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
right.
So I'm like really tall, so
yeah.
People tend not to try, and it just gives that little extra edge of intimidation.
Cool.
I guess, which I'm not intimidated at all. I'm quite a friendly person, but I think it just kind of, anything in that business, I think, can kind of give you an edge.
Would you say it's gotten better over the years? Because a lot of the places, I follow various things on LinkedIn, for instance, and you get like really inspiring messages about like female CEOs and female like women in power and stuff, and it's really good, uplifting stuff. It's good to see, and I've obviously seen examples of I guess sexism or it feels like a bit of a strong word because it's not always necessarily like straight sexism. It can be more like kind of institutional sexism. If that
right.
Yeah. So it's like,
it can be systemic. It's like the old adage. I mean, there's a lot, we're talking a lot right now about things like, the whole racism thing and Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. So, again, having lived in the deep South in America, that's a very different thing. And it's, I don't want to say it's a similar thing. It's not similar at all, but just sort of to your point of saying things can be systemic. I've experienced things down there that I've kind of witnessed and gone, oh my God. But yet the perpetrators of it, that sort of way of being is so ingrained in them that they don't even realize that they're doing something that's completely inappropriate. So that's probably where the change has to start with a lot of those things. But you're right. I mean, I think it's changed over the years. I think there's more opportunities now for women, like you say. There's many more female CEOs and stuff like that. But I think like me, probably most women in business will say they've experienced some sexism or some sort of discrimination at the end of the day. And for me, I think sometimes it gets shouted down about it, but it kind of, it goes with the turf a lot of the time, especially when you're the first person going in there. You have to change perception. You have to change hearts and minds, and someone's got to do that, and it's not always easy, but it is changing. I think it's changed for the better.
That's kind of my hope with that, really, because you hear a lot of stories about how things are changing and stuff, but there's a big difference between what's been spoken about and then the reality. And as you said, like quite rightly, you go to, like, obviously when I was in Estonia, it's not to say Estonians are racist or anything, but you do meet people that have interesting opinions and stuff on things. And I don't hold that against people because, as you said, like a lot of the time, it's not even necessarily meant maliciously. It's just like upbringing, history, various different things. And you do have to like take these things into account. But as far as like workplaces are concerned, I mean, the ideal is obviously that things are just on merit. Do you know what I mean? And how you work. Because I mean, I've had like female bosses, male bosses, bosses from all different, worked with people from all around the world. I don't really notice any difference either way. To me, it's just kind of like, is someone good or bad at their job? That's what I care about.
I mean, I've had people actually flat out come out to me and accuse me of being, a certain way or a certain thing, because you only hire this type of person, or you hired this person over me, so therefore that means you're, insert insult here. And a lot of the time it really wasn't that. It's like, especially when you're a manager of somewhere, you care that person can do the job or not, because if they can do the job and do it well, it saves you an awful lot of headaches, and that's really all you're looking at. In that regard, can someone do the tasks that are needed as set, and just the level that you need them doing to, because they just need to do the job,
This next question, I'm bringing it back to freelancing.
Okay.
I kind of already know the answer, or I feel that I know, but I just wanted to ask anyway, just in
Mhm.
case. Do you think that having a university education is necessary in order to become a successful freelancer?
No, I don't. I think, and don't get
No.
me wrong, I don't think education is ever wasted. I don't.
Right.
But well, I'm saying I'll backtrack on that a little bit because I think it probably depends on what you want to freelance in. So that can come down very much to industry choice, and there's definitely
Mm.
certain industries or that you're going to need an education on, or definitely at least some knowledge on. But just for regular sort of freelancing. I don't know what I would define regular
I know
freelancing
what
as,
you
but
mean.
I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's not. I think you can. I think if you're, reasonably savvy, you have a good business knowledge, a good command of I don't know, English language or whatever, you can probably make your way as a freelancer without a university education, I think. So therefore, I think that probably opens up quite a lot of, and it depends what you define freelancing as. I mean, some people that are, Uber drivers will describe themselves as freelancers, and you can definitely do that without, a college education, and you can make money doing that. I don't know about here, but I think you could in America.
It's an interesting thing to me, and I think one of the reasons why I asked is because one of the things I realized straight away when I finished my degree
Mm-hmm.
was that, and this was before I was doing freelancing, but I kind of did the degree initially because I just couldn't find a job that wasn't customer service based.
Right.
And I just wanted to move out of customer services. There's nothing against customer services, but like I just felt that there was, a limit on my progression there and what I
Mm-hmm.
could achieve. And I wanted to just do stuff that used more of my mind and my
Right.
creative stuff. And um, so when I looked at the job market at the time, there wasn't any kind of schemes or anything or
Mm-hmm.
apprenticeships, anything like that. It was non-existent. But then
Right.
when I finished my degree, it suddenly became apparent that like actually these internships, apprenticeships, schemes were now cropping up, and they were the
Right.
kind of majority. And actually having a
Mm-hmm.
degree didn't really matter either
Massively
way.
different. Yeah.
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 I mean, I feel like
That's frustrating though when you've spent 4 years, in education to come out and there's nothing there.
but it's like you said. I mean, I think it depends. Like, because I've been thinking about doing either a podcast or a video on this soon, and I think one of the major points that I feel about uni in terms of whether or not you go or you should go or not
Mm-hmm.
ultimately comes down to your industry. I mean, if you're looking to become obviously like a doctor, a lawyer, something like
Right.
that, then it is necessary. But in terms of business, um, I don't really think it is. I mean, when I did my degree in marketing, as soon as I actually started working in the field, I had to learn everything from scratch.
Right. Yeah.
Everything I've
I mean,
learned.
I think, university is great, and I would never knock
Yeah, yeah.
education. It's never wasted, but I think it is very much a sort of theoretical, and then when you come out into the job market and try and apply the theories that you've learned and put them into place, I think, you usually find it's a very different, um, a very different way of being, very different from what you imagined it to be, to what you were taught in the classroom.
Absolutely. Moving it forward, just kind of close on freelancing in general, because I know I've asked you quite a lot of
No,
questions
no.
about this, but it all makes sense soon. What advice would you give to people considering going freelance?
Get some money behind you, number one. Promote yourself as much as you can anyway. Enlist, this all sounds a little bit sort of trite. It's the sort of stuff you can read on any blog, but it's true. It's like, enlist the help of any friends, families, promote yourself. You know, make sure you know what you're selling. Be clear about what you're selling. Be clear about what your talents and your skills are. And I have a marketing background too, as you do. So I'm big on sort of marketing to that.
Yeah, yeah.
So play to your strengths, I suppose, is the advice I'd give. But the advice I'd give anybody is the sort of, if you're gonna quit the day job to go freelancing, I would say just try and get just as much cash behind yourself as you can, because it's having some money behind you is never going to make it harder.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think with freelancing, a lot of the time, it's about landing like big contracts or consistent, like building
Right, consistent.
relationships. Yeah, like I felt a lot lately that building those business relationships is kind of key because, you know, you can kind of have, you know, like for instance, when I worked in this finance company, there were some people we worked with who were freelancers who'd been freelancing and working with that company for like 5 years. So you can have like long-term partnerships. And I think a lot of the time it's good in terms of like not having to have a contract or, you know, like your agreement is like kept very simple. So it's, you know, it's, and it can be like rescinded at any point kind of thing. So it's,
and to your point earlier, I think maybe because of the pandemic, it's brought things forward a little bit, but I tended to think that industry needed to change a little bit, probably a little bit sooner than it has. And I think this has sort of brought it to the fore. So more people are looking at freelancing and remote working as because I think we are starting to shift more and to understand that, you know, people can operate much more on that results-based premise rather than you punch the clock at 8 o'clock and you punch it again to leave at 5 o'clock and just sit behind a desk for the full time, you know. So I think it's definitely shifting.
It kind of, I know I said it before, but it kind of blows my mind how people don't see how inefficient that model is.
It's so inefficient. You know, even in my career, I knew that was inefficient, you know.
Anyway, we've finally got to the moment. We're going to ask you about your company, GigLeads. Okay. Now, the reason that I asked you so many questions and built up this picture was to kind of, I wanted to get behind the person who runs the company and kind of give people an idea of you and your background. So it would make sense as the kind of like the, I suppose, journey to the creation of this company. Now, as you said before, you've started this company about 2 months ago. Now, this is just my understanding. I could be wrong on this, but is it sort of like a database style website that collects leads from other like job websites, puts them into one place for you, and then you've kind of got access to lots of different leads in one place? It saves you time?
That's absolutely correct. With just there's a couple of extra things that go into that, but you're absolutely correct. Yeah, that's very much what it is.
So what else kind of that I missed goes into this process?
There's a few other things. So, you know, the whole premise of GigLeads, why I started, I was, as you covered, I've done the freelancing world myself, and I felt that I spent an awful lot of time sort of hunting and pecking and searching different job sites and searching different areas to try and like as you mentioned, to get that sort of consistency of clients, that consistency of work. So this is why I've put together GigLeads, to try and just get everything all into one place to make it. So it is, it's probably easy to say it's a job site, but in some ways it's a productivity tool as well. The whole essence of GigLeads is to try and be a time-saving tool for freelancers, so they can just go to this as a one-stop shop almost. And we've got some, and there's a couple of additions to that. And I think unlike some other sites, we've got some freelancer pages as well. And it's very much sort of geared towards the UK at the moment. Whether that will spread out a little more into Europe, that's all sort of, you know, in discussion at the moment. We'll see, but it's very much targeted to UK freelancers, because what I saw was there wasn't an awful lot that everyone seems to focus on America, or everything seems to get sort of deluged by the freelancers that come from sort of further over into Europe, India, or whatever. So I'm like, well, where's the British people? Because I know there's loads of us here. There's loads of us doing the freelancing stuff. So that's why I put it together. And you're absolutely right, is to aggregate jobs from basically as many websites as we can find and put them sort of as a repository in one place for people to then apply to and save time.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, when I saw your service, like the first thing that I kind of looked at was, okay, this reminds me of say, like freelancer.com, TrueLancer, those kind of websites. So, like, what would you say are the major differences between your service versus those more sort of well-known existing competitors?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of those services, they tend to be based on a commission. Commission basis, a lot of them. So, you know, you do a certain amount of work and they're going to take a percentage of it. Although GigLeads is a paid service, we don't dig into your actual work, and we try and keep the fees for the services quite low. You know, it's not a highly expensive service. We hope, and nobody thinks, for the time that you're saving. You're talking like £2 or £3 a week to have everything aggregated in one place, so you can then access it easily. And once you do that, you're applying to jobs, then we kind of step out. It's completely between you to negotiate with client on rate and all the rest of it. And we're not, we don't do anything where we take, I think some sites operate on a bidding fee platform. Yeah, which, you're paying to bid on a job. It's that. And I think, I won't mention names, but there's one I looked at probably a couple of years ago, and they were like, by the time you did the math, it was costing you like 35 quid sometimes to bid on a job. And it's like, nobody can afford that if you don't get the job at the end of it, and plus as well, I think we probably targeted a little as well to the newer freelancers coming in, because it's so hard to get in and to get your foot on the ladder. So
that company you're talking, because I remember looking into this myself, and I kind of eventually I just decided I'm just going to chase my own leads, because why would you bid? Like, what I understood was, okay, I can sign up, okay, I've got all of this stuff done now, and then I realized, wait, you have to pay to bid on the job. What do you mean? I'm trying to make money, not lose money.
And actually, I can't remember if they kind of double dip and take a commission as well. I can't remember that really part. Cheeky. But and if they do, I'm not. But but then there's other companies that do. I mean, I've worked with companies like that take a commission, and some really aren't bad. Once you get past a certain earning level, they'll take maybe 10%, and I'm like, you know what, 10% to put my money in escrow and protect it. I'm not gonna argue about that. But yet they are still taking a percentage of that wage, which, and if you've got a big job, that can add up to quite a substantial chunk out of your earnings. So that's why we base this as basically a membership subscription site rather than that commission based payment.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, you've got 3 different membership plans. You've got what I can see as a monthly, a yearly, and a 6-month plan. I did kind of want to ask you, because I think they're reasonably priced based on what you're offering. I think that's pretty reasonable, especially the fact that you said that there isn't a commission fee, because to my knowledge, I don't think any other companies are doing that. I think they all charge some degree of a commission, usually pretty high.
And that'll stand as we go forward and we grow. At the minute, as you say, we are aggregating a lot of jobs from different websites, but we're talking to quite a few people now. We're going to have the ability for people to go on, if you wanted to hire, let's say you wanted to hire a writer or something, you can go on, post a job on there, freelancers can apply to it. We haven't got massive amounts of people doing that, but that will grow. That's something we're targeting. And as that grows, we're going to keep the same, we're going to keep the exact same payment methods. It's not, again, we're not looking to take commissions from people,
Yeah, so to clarify that last point, you're basically saying that this is a website both for freelancers looking for work and also companies or individuals looking to get the services of freelancers.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. Do you have any plans, and I'm sorry if I got this wrong, but I just want to double check this. Do you have any plans to sort of introduce a sort of a free trial for users who might sort of want to test out your services before they commit straight away?
We did that initially, but for some reason that just doesn't seem to work very well. So what we do is on the first month is we give the 50% discount on the first month. So so you sign up, there's a code on there you can put in, it's right there when you go to the sign up page. You get the first month at 50% off. So it's basically going to cost you £5 to sign up and to see what it's all about.
I was going to say, because for the monthly one, it's currently £10 a month, isn't it? So for that first month, it would just be £5.
So for the first month, you can get it for £5.
That's excellent.
And actually, the reason we did that was to get some commitment from freelancers on the other side, and it was almost just like a psychological thing, like we're talking about, because we were running into problems where we'd give a month free, and then when the billing started, we're starting to get all these nasty emails about, hey, you took our money with that. No, we didn't. You put your card. But so we wanted to avoid that. And of course, so
this business seems logical in terms of bringing in sort of an ongoing revenue stream, since freelancers are always kind of looking for new projects. Exactly. But are there any other kind of key factors behind your decision to target freelancers with this particular business model?
Probably just because I've worked in the industry myself, and I know how difficult it is to keep that stream of of the revenue going, of clients going. And I figured it's sort of it's a way for freelancers to get in, to apply for multiple jobs, and they can gain a little bit of exposure by. I don't know if you looked at the profile pages there.
Yeah, I
Much
had
the
a little
freelancer
look
search
at it,
page.
yeah.
Yeah, that people can go on, they can add their profile, they can add their social media links, they can
Mm.
put some examples of past work. So anybody seeking freelancers or freelancer services can sort of browse. They can even browse by city. They can just zoom in on the map and kind of click on the freelancers that are signed up and contact them directly if they want. And there's no additional charge for that. That's just something that's a straight communication between client and freelancer that we don't get involved in. So I figure that's a nice little addition for again, newer freelancers to gain a little more exposure.
What are the biggest kind of challenges that you've faced with building this company? Like, I understand obviously it's still early days and stuff,
Very,
but
yeah.
it is a startup, and there are always kind of challenges with starting up a startup, usually in the cost area of like building up funds and stuff to make it happen. But since you're fully based online, that kind of enables you to circumvent various costs and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, what are the biggest challenges that you've faced so far?
I think the biggest challenge is probably just on a technical level, is just getting everything work the way you want it to. And I'm probably a bit of a perfectionist. I'm constantly like going in and tweaking something else, but we're sort of testing some of the things that we're hoping will be very useful to freelancers. We're just in the process now of testing the daily email alerts, which doesn't sound like a huge thing, but it's another time saving thing. Like, instead of even actually going to the GigLeads site, the email will drop in your inbox every day with all the latest jobs listed there for you that you can then just click on and apply to. So that's even more time saving than just aggregating the jobs in the first place.
That one's a game changer, actually. I used to use this particular service. I think it might have been American based, I can't remember, but it was offering a similar thing. And I remember thinking, like, this is perfect. It has all the links in there, you can click them, and then I don't have to then check, like, say 5 different websites. I can just have it sent to me. So that's...
Exactly, that's and I think actually I probably know the site you're talking about, and it's a little ironic because I built GigLeads, and so backtrack again, about 5 or 6 years ago when I first went freelancing, because logistics and supply chain was my background, and I'd done some recruitment, and there's a massive shortage in the logistics and supply chain industry of good talent, drivers all the way through to warehouse people, all the way through to managers. And I built this exact website, but for the logistics industry. So I've basically taken that model now and I've used it for the freelance industry, and then turned around and saw the site that I think you're talking about and went, almost looks the same, but I promise you it wasn't poached off of him. It was a model. And actually in some ways I'm kicking myself because it's a model, as I say, I used about 5 years ago for logistics, supply chain, recruitment, basically. And now it's working so well for freelancers. Part of me sort of kicking myself going, why didn't I set this up like 3 or 4 years ago? But you live and learn. That's part of your process of going on your own. You're constantly sort of changing and evolving and learning new things.
I think things happen at the right time, don't they?
They do.
I mean,
I
I thought about that as well. Like, why didn't I do freelancing from an earlier age? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do podcasting earlier? But I think that you do need to go through certain things in life to kind of get to that stage.
I think every step leads you to the next step, and you learn all the things that you need to learn along the way, and eventually it's sort of, if you're fortunate, it all sort of comes to fruition in one major aspect, one major area.
What would you say have been your sort of biggest successes so far with this particular company?
So early days, so that's
I know, sorry.
So we launched, and actually in terms of challenges, I'll just go back to that a second if I can.
Go for it.
It's kind of funny, I'd sort of put this together and I was really more or less just sort of testing the market to see if there'd be a market to this. So I built the site out and I just sort of built it there it was. I'd just sort of built it on, I think, some like domain I had kicking around. And then it took off really well. So I went, oh, there's a market for this. So I instantly, after about a month, had to turn around and rebrand the whole thing into GigLeads. So, you know, I mean, you know, we all make mistakes, but, you know, you learn from those. And, you know, so I wanted to change the name, change it into GigLeads, because it just seemed much more reflective of what it, you know, what it was about, what the company was about, what we were trying to achieve.
That's a good name.
Yeah. So, you know, it gets the point across, and, you know, hopefully it's useful for people. But in terms of successes, I've seen some good success already. I think it's, you know, it's definitely it's got people's interest. It's got people signing up. I'm doing podcasts with people now. Like you mentioned, you're my first one. I've got a couple more lined up. I've been approached by someone that does quite a large online seminar.
Oh,
for these
fantastic.
sort of things, that wants me to come on basically like as a keynote speaker.
That's a great opportunity.
I think the biggest success that I've got up my sleeve at the moment, and it hasn't come to fruition yet, so I'm not going to mention the name of the company.
That's fine. Yeah, I get that.
But it is another startup that I've had a few conversations with, and basically that would add a payment processing engine to this site that is specifically for freelancers.
Synergy.
Yeah, which, you know, if this all transpires the way I would like it to, it would basically give them, the freelancer, the whole one-stop shop. They can negotiate directly with clients, and then they can choose to use the payment processing tool or not. That's something that'll be a third party from me. I don't own it. It'll be a separate thing. Obviously then for their service, there would be a small charge to freelancers for using it, but it basically protects their money, basically protects their earnings. And it's not, I think we've had some discussions about what's being charged for that, and you're in the 2-3% area. It's no more than, say, like a PayPal commission or something like that. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that all works out the way I would like it to, because then that, to me, that sort of adds like the last element to that whole site, you know.
And to sort of draw things to a close on GigLeads, what are your main kind of goals and aspirations for this business?
Main goals and aspirations, I'd like to grow it so, you know, it's just very much known, you know, household name almost for independent freelancers in the UK. And I think I'm quite proud of it being UK based, even though I've spent so much time in America. It's nice to sort of come back and do something for, you know, for the people of my own country, I suppose. I'd just like it to go on and see it change and evolve the way it has so quickly already. It's been really exciting. But I'd like to just, you know, I mean, I don't want to, I think it's not something where I'm going, hey, I want to grow it in some like massive corporation, but I'd definitely like it to be a go-to tool for many freelancers, and hopefully they find value in that.
Absolutely. And just to draw things all to a close today, my final question for you is, do you have any kind of upcoming projects, events, or maybe just some final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Upcoming projects, just the ones we've mentioned. I think there's going to be probably quite a few more upcoming podcasts, probably some more seminars, and I can imagine that again, this whole payment processing element that we'd like to add to the site. I think if that goes ahead, that's probably going to take up quite a lot of my time in the coming months, but hopefully it's all for the good.
Absolutely. I'll have my fingers crossed for you. I think this is a very promising business, and particularly when it comes to the setup of the membership plans and what you're sort of discussing there. That's not something that I've seen as a common thing within the freelancing sort of community. So it's good. And particularly for the UK market, I think, especially with what we spoke about earlier about how things are changing and where things are headed, I think this is an excellent time to be setting up something like this. So I wish you all of the best with this business. I'm sure it's going to work out, and hopefully this podcast will do something for you and the rest of
that would be great if it does. And I very much appreciate you having me on your show. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for appearing. It's been a real pleasure. And I just want to say to all of my listeners, obviously if you're freelancing, make sure to go check out GigLeads and set yourself up a profile there. It seems really cheap to start up, so it's an opportune moment to get that started and get yourself some more work. And also, for any startup businesses, any guests that would like to appear on the show in the future, please get in touch. I would love to have you on the show. I'd love to get to know you, get to know your business, or, you know, whatever you have to promote or want to talk about. Get in touch with me. I would love to have you on the show. I do hope everyone is enjoying the podcast and enjoying all these different things I'm trying with it right now. I'm trying to make it as varied as I can. But, you know, invariably it's going to keep moving forward and keep growing. And it's very exciting. So thank you very much for listening, subscribing to the podcast, supporting the podcast. I really appreciate it. And until next time, peace out. I'll see you in the next one.